Hello and welcome to another edition of the Hitting the Hardwood podcast, your home for all the latest Minnesota Lynx and WNBA news, analysis, and coverage. Thank you for tuning into another episode. I'm your host, Mitchell Hansen, and this week I'm joined by not one, but two guests on the podcast, Jack Borman and Leo Sun, who I work alongside at Canis Hoopus, covering the Lynx. Guys, thanks for joining. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you having us, man.
Before we dive into things, I kind of want to just open it up to you guys to, as I do for every guest, just let people know where they can find you. Obviously, I mentioned they can find all of our work at Canis Hoopus, and there's been a lot of great work already, and there will be more to come this year, obviously. But where can they find you on social media and in any other space that you guys have your work?
Yeah, you can find me at Canis. My Twitter is at JRBorman13, JRBORMN13. And I'm pretty active on there too.
Similarly, you can find me at Canis Hoopus, and on Twitter is usually where you'll hear my musings. You can find me at YoLeo, but that's Y0LEO. I think I'm currently in a two-way fight for the actual at YoLeo Twitter handle. There's a guy who covers the Giants, but he's also been waiting for someone who's been squatting at YoLeo, and so I think we're waiting to see who's going to get that. So that's been kind of fun.
One of the many social media fights, right?
Not enough of them.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll dive right into things. For a little bit of a background for the listeners, at Canis Hoopus, leading up to the regular season, myself and the rest of the guys here, as well as Benny Hughes, we did a roundtable to just kind of preview the season, come up with predictions, kind of bold predictions that we have, some awards, preseason awards, who we think is going to be the leading scorer, MVP, all of that stuff. So we're gonna kind of go over that a little bit and maybe just kind of get a little bit of insight from each of the guys here, Jack and Leo, just to just kind of talk about it a little bit more and kind of where we see this team this year. So, for the first thing that we had talked about was season outcome. And I think that a lot of us, record wise, we're all around the same. I mean, we have a little bit of a expanded schedule this year with a 40 game season, but we're all around that, 14, 16, 18, 20 win marks. We're around the same as what the Lynx finished last year. Some of us have, them reaching the playoffs. I know I had them, kind of getting that eighth spot. I think at some point they might threaten the seventh spot. Leo has them coming up short of the playoffs. Jack has them reaching the playoffs, losing in the first round. Benny has them, barely missing at 18 and 22, and I believe on the outside of the postseason. But what do you guys think that this team will do? I do think that it'll be a slow start to the year. Obviously with the younger roster and them still all kind of meshing together, I think it'll be a bumpy ride to start the year. I think once you do get those rookies kind of acclimated, maybe once they figure out the rotations a little bit more, maybe move a couple pieces around, I think that, that will be beneficial and this team will start to improve at that point. It's kind of similar to what we've seen the last 2 years with, they haven't really done this on purpose, but they've started the year slow and then they've increased as they've gone along and played better in the second half of the year. I personally, on my end, I think that that's what'll happen. That's why I think that they'll kind of sneak into that last spot. What do you guys think that, what do you think that this team will look like? And what'll ultimately happen? Leo, I'll maybe start with you if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think I was one of the few that had them missing the playoffs, just my prediction. And I actually, thought it could have been a little bit inverse to what you said in terms of the start of the season. I think with the new faces, whether it's a rookies or, Tiffany Mitchell getting an expanded role or Napisa Collier come back, I felt like they could have jumped on a couple of the teams early in the season. In the beginning, you don't know what to expect from teams, and people don't know, all right, what are they running? We're not used to a Cheryl Reeves team, playing a 5-out offense like this or whatever, that they could have stole a couple early. But I think, as the season progressed and teams started to find their rhythm, the talent starts to win out. And I would see that coming in and them ending a little bit worse. But either way, I think this season, I think we all probably agree as well too, is less about the actual final standings, but more about the development throughout the season. Like, who are the keepers that are really trying to stay here for multiple years into that next era? And so, for that, it wouldn't be disappointing for me if they come up short of the playoffs, as long as they're doing it the right way. I think a lot of last season was, at least that beginning chunk was messed up with the whole, Ingram McCautry thing, coming in and kind of having that weird exit, bringing Ozzie Sims in for it felt like a game, and then she was out. And so I think there was just a lot of weird roster stuff going on last year that just made it felt like a distasteful season in general. And so this year, even if we miss the playoffs, as long as there's some type of continuity, I'd be happy with that.
I do think that's a very good point, that just having, the same group of players is going to be big, and not only for, just this season, but the development of the team moving forward. I mean, it's obviously a young roster, that's no secret, but I do think that's obviously a key aspect in having them all grow together and stay together and not have any more moving parts. You can add to it, but maybe not switch up like they have, in years past or even last year. But Jack, how about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think I'm honestly kind of right down the middle of those two lines of thought. I think that it will be a little bit of a slower start, at least once we get to the beginning part of June. And then if you look at the schedule, it really does get a lot easier. And a lot of the teams that they're facing have some significant injury problems, whether it's the Sky or the Wings or the Mercury, the Lake, or the Sparks. All those teams are battling significant injuries in their rotation, and that's not nothing to sneeze at. Like, I think obviously the Lynx are a little bit behind the 8 ball just in terms of the talent they have on the team and how they have, a little bit of a deficiency there compared to maybe some teams that are kind of comparable to them in the standings. But so I think that'll help them a little bit and could lead to them. I don't know if overachieving is the right word, but I think maybe doing a little better than what people think. I think Vegas had them at 16.5. I think if they stay healthy, that it'd be tough for them not to get to that 17 number, just because I think Fee and Diamond are so talented. And then you throw into the mix, Rachel's bound to have a couple of her 23, 24 point games where she just kind of swings it. Or where her and K-Mac can just kind of take over a game from 3. So, I mean, I'm a little more positive on them just because I think that this style of play suits the roster that they have much better than what they did last year. And just the way that Jess Shepard should be able to kind of help unlock everybody and kind of help the pieces mesh a little bit. So I had them at 20-20. But again, I think a lot of that has to do with no injuries to teams like the Sky, the Wings, Mercury, Sparks, and then just who knows, like that the schedule gets really easy in August too. So if they end up meshing pretty well and finding their groove, who knows what they could throw together in August and make a little bit of a run. But like you said, Mitchell, I don't know if that's the goal this year or not. So we'll end up seeing, I think, from the kind of the tier of teams that the Lynx are in, who really wants to get aggressive with development, I guess is what we'll call it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point about the whole schedule thing as well too, Jack. I mean, there is so much. Obviously, all the narrative this season in the W is the 2 super teams, right? And so there's X amount of teams that have lost top tier talent as well too. And I think that's something that I definitely probably didn't think about enough, is that like there's a lot more, I guess, for lack of a better word, parity amongst the other 10 teams in the league. And so I definitely can see that impacting like their records. Like it could be a toss up, right? So that's a great point.
That's kind of where I was at with, record aside, with them, kind of sneaking into that last spot, is the layout of the league. And this will change if, and knock on wood, when we do get some expanded teams or expansion teams, maybe, at least 2, whatever it may be. It's hard to not make the playoffs in the WNBA just because there's only 12 teams. And now people look at, me saying they're going to reach, be maybe the 8th seed, reach the 7th seed, or be in kind of contention for that 7 seed, and they're going to view it as, wow, they're really going to improve. Maybe not necessarily. I just think that middle ground, or that middle group, that's anywhere from basically, I don't know, 4 or 5 to probably 10, is just so transparent, so even, that we don't really know. And I think whoever can kind of hit a hot stretch and kind of figure it out, maybe even at the end of the year, I think has a spot in the playoffs. And it's just, it's very, and that maybe that is a downfall to the top heavy teams, or having those top heavy teams, is you have everybody else that's just kind of middle of the pack. But I don't know. I think that they do have a chance. I think that they're not gonna, just maybe, deliberately, tank or just kind of lose those games on purpose. I think that's hard to do in any sport, and players don't want to do that. Coaches don't want to do that. They're fighting for their jobs. They're trying to fight for their next opportunity, their next contract, whatever that may be. So that's hard for them to do. But, I could see, I understand both sides of things. If they maybe didn't want to go at it as hard, but I ultimately think that they're going to end up, reaching that maybe 8th seed. But it'll be interesting. I don't know. I think it'll be very similar to last year. But there's obviously different moving parts or different parts with this team. It's a different angle than what it was last year. So that's a completely different thing.
And I think the vibes will be a lot better this year. Like, even if they had the exact same record, like, I think everybody's going to be happier. And, too, like, I still think you call it a successful season if Diamond Miller is a lot better in game 30 than she is in game 1. Same thing with Dorka, same thing with Taylor Soul if she's back, which I think she probably will be here in the next month, depending on who might end up leaving. But yeah, I just think there's going to be other ways to measure how successful a season it is than wins and losses. And I think because of that, I think it'll lead to, a more cohesive group and a happier Cheryl Reeve. And I think last season really wore on everybody, even people covering the team. So I think overall, just having a group that is more fun and a product that is more fun to watch, regardless of what the scoreboard says, will be a lot of fun.
I did want to mention too. So Mitchell, you brought up that dangerous T word, tanking. I always remember, hearing about like, oh, well, like the Lynx are like the Spurs of the WNBA, right? Like a well-run organization. And, you think about who just won the lottery, on the NBA side, the MNBA side, that was more of a tank job. Obviously, we'd have to go super deep into it, but, there's a lot of talent, next year's draft, and, missing the playoffs, having a lottery spot, might not be the worst thing either. And so, if it comes down to the final 2 games, or we're sitting at like 9th place, would I be surprised if, Coach Reeve decides to, all right, well, Dean's kind of nursing this, we got to rest a couple players this side or the other. How many more coaches have more stability in their role than Reeve does? Right. I don't know how much of that would be like, oh, well, you're going to be on the hot seat if you don't make it. It's like, all right, well, she has that freedom.
Yeah, no, I mean, she's got the most secure job, I think, of anybody in the league. But I mean, the biggest thing too is, like, you look at Cheryl last night on the sidelines. That is not a coach who is like expecting her team to not play that well. Like, she was still the same Cheryl Reeve that we saw last year. Like, she's stomping her feet. She's screaming at the refs. She's screaming at her players. She platoon swapped a minute and a half into the second quarter because she was fed up with the bench. Like, I think in the game, it's still going to be the same Cheryl Reeve. But I think before games, after games, at practices, you'll just see a coach that I think is more loose, and isn't as kind of like, her mood isn't quite determined as much by wins and losses as it may have been in the past. So that'll also be an interesting thing to see too. And have to wonder if that, leads to better or worse relationships with players on and off the floor too.
Yeah, it is basically the first time. it is basically too the first time that we've really had a Lynx team that didn't have expectations. Like we really don't, nobody's expecting them to do anything this year. Even you could even say last year that, they admitted that they were going to try and push their chips in for Sil. They're trying to do, they're trying to reach the playoffs. They're trying to make a deep playoff run, see what they can do one last year for Sil. In years past, they tried to do that for whatever player that was left, whether it's, you go back to the Lindsay Whalen, Rebecca Brunson, when Maya Moore was still here, that's a little different situation because she didn't, say while she was playing that it was her last year, but they tried to, piece those together, put a title run together. They had high expectations. They knew they were going to be in the playoffs. They just needed to make a deep playoff run. This year it's completely different. And I do think that, Jack, to your point, that, that'll help with the mood of the team and just kind of, they have a vision, they have a future for probably the first time in a while. And that's not a knock on the dynasty run. Any team, any organization would do the exact same thing that Minnesota did, and they would love that situation to unfold. But that was never, as the later years came on, that wasn't sustainable. That they knew that was coming to an end, but now they have a vision for the future and trying to build something else. And every team goes through that. Leo, like you said, with San Antonio, with the Spurs, like they're going through it right now, and they're hoping that they can turn that page and they can continue to have sustainable success for the future like they have in the years past. But everybody goes through that, and Minnesota's going through that right now, and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing, and you have to have those foundation pieces, and that leads to success. So it'll be a fun year, I think, just to see how the pieces grow. To see how the development takes place and how these rookies kind of come into their own.
Right. Yeah, not to belabor the point, but yeah, I do agree with both of you. In the fact that last year was almost a little bit of kind of force, that square peg into the round hole with like, all right, well, Sil's last year, we gotta win it. I'm gonna change out whatever pieces I need to do with the roster. We gotta do whatever. And it's like that team just was not built. I think we were almost consumed by it. And so I think this year, yeah, I totally agree is that, there hopefully will be more flexibility, a little bit more of that, like, all right, well, let's see what we got and like, let's do the best that we can. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, moving on to the rest of our roundtable at Canis Hoopus, I'll just kind of gloss over this a little bit. Another thing we talked about was the best offseason additions. And it was kind of a split 2-2 with Tiffany Mitchell and Dorka Juhas. I think those two, we all can agree will have impacts this year. And I think Dorka might be a little bit, might take her just a little bit just to get her feet wet in the WNBA, but I think she'll be a solid piece, as well as Tiffany Mitchell, in her first year with Minnesota. When it comes to the biggest surprise players, we mentioned I had Tiffany Mitchell, Leo had Jess Shepard, Jack had Dorka Juhas, Benny had Rachel Banham, so a little bit of a mix there. But I think the overwhelming theme is they're all role players that will have the chance and will have the ability to step up. And I definitely think that all of those players will play key roles, and they will have their opportunities, which is great. We also talked about leading scorer, most valuable player. We had a consensus of Fee. I think that we all can agree that the important part of the Minnesota Lynx is how Nafisa Collier does and how she does leading this team. She is obviously the best player on the team, and everything that the Lynx do is surrounding her right now. So she's not only the most valuable, player that they have, but I think she'll be the most valuable player at the end of the year, if that makes sense. That she will be key to everything Minnesota does, and hopefully she, as we saw in the regular season opener, she appears to be back. She talked about being 2021 Fee, and it looks like that. So that's a good thing. We'll talk about this a little bit. The bold prediction part, to end this piece at canishoopus.com. Bold prediction. I had mentioned that Nafisa Collier will be in the MVP discussion, not only for the team MVP, but for the league-wide MVP award. I think that with her taking things over, she's gonna take it and run, and I think that she'll at least be in that conversation. I don't think she'll win it, I think that if Elena Deladon's healthy, she's going to win it this year, or Brittany Griner could potentially, win the MVP this year. I think those are kind of, I don't want to say dark horses, but those are two of my players that I'm watching just because they're not on quote unquote super teams like other players are. And I do think that Fee will be in maybe that handful top 5 in the conversation if she does continue on the projection that we think that she'll be in. Leo talked. I like this one. Leo thinks Nina Milic will be the full-time starting center at some point this year or by the end of the year. Leo, you want to talk about that before we get into Jax?
Sure. So it's a bold prediction, right? So I tried to go a little hot. So is that necessarily what I'm expecting to happen, by the end of next week? Like, no, but I really liked what we saw from Nina last year. And I think, Coach Reeve really liked what she saw as well, too. Coming as a non-traditional rookie, coming in, I think there were games where Nina had a huge impact out there. And I think, Reeve talks about it a lot during training camp about how, one of the key strengths of the team is their flexibility. They have players like, she mentioned being even sliding down to 3, Tiffany Mitchell being able to play either guard spots. Even with Jess Shepard, like being able to rotate, like she has such a flexible skill set that, you can run, perhaps another big next to her. And so, I think Nina Milic, having a full year, under her belt with the team and then coming in now, I could totally see, with more opportunity and more minutes that she could put up more. I mean, last year, if you look it up on the per 100 possessions, game by game stats, she was 3rd on the team in scoring, 4th in rebounding. She made an impact when she was out there. I think we got a mixed bag yesterday, against the Sky and Nina's performance. She had, I think, kind of a rough first stint, but off the bench. But just like, all the other players off the bench, she had a rough stint. But when she came in at the end, they made that little run. I mean, the game was never really in question, but she did have a number of, key plays down the stretch where it's like, all right, like I should think she will continue to earn that trust. I don't feel like she's a player that, will make a ton of mistakes all the time. She's not just some, 22 or 23-year-old, rookie coming in. She has a lot more experience coming in. So I think that could definitely help kind of guide that ship, especially in the front court. So, yeah, that's my bold predictions. By the end of the season, she will be the full-time starting center.
Okay. I like it. Jack, you talked about Jess Shepard. You said Jess Shepard will lead the team in assists and averages around 5 per game. I think that obviously health with Jess Shepard is a key thing, but she's been somebody that has shown that ability to be that all around kind of do it all player. What was your thought on or kind of reasoning behind choosing that for your prediction?
Yeah, I mean, and we saw it last night, right? I think. What just finished with 7-8 assists and just 1 turnover, I think. So the biggest thing with Jess is I think that she's got, of any player out there on the entire team, it has the best understanding of spacing and has the best understanding of like how to pass people open and how to get things organized in the half court. Like you saw in the in the second and third quarters, the Lynx were just turning it over like their lives depended on it. And then in the fourth quarter, you really saw Jess kind of come up to the top of the key and start to, come receive the ball and help out Rachel and Tiffany Mitchell once they receive ball screens from other players. And Jess did a great job. I think she had 2 assists right away to start the third quarter, had a couple more in the fourth quarter. And as Diamond Miller really learns how to become a better cutter, it wasn't something she did a whole lot at Maryland. I think you're going to only see the impact that Jess can have grow. And I think too, like Cheryl talked about it a little bit last night, that Fee is kind of trying to find her way as a player that's now starting to have to create a lot of her offense from the perimeter rather than in the post. And, I still think we could get situations where those two are on the floor together and Jess can get an entry pass into Fee down low on the block too, where even if it's not an assist, it's still, being the playmaker that creates a great opportunity for your teammate. And with Jess, I just think that it's going to take a little bit to get this point guard situation figured out. And while they're still struggling to figure it out, I still think you can bank on Jess really thriving in space and running dribble handoffs and passing to cutters, whether it's Fee or Diamond or a guard in K-Mac or even, somebody like Dorka, who has shown to be a pretty solid cutter in the first 3 times she's suited up for the Lynx. So that was kind of where it came from there. Just, I think it's, almost as much of a, of it being a slow start for the point guards than it is, her really, in my opinion, being the best fit for how this offense is going to work in the half court.
Yeah, I hope she's obviously can stay healthy. That goes for every player on the roster, but Jess Shepard, I think that's been kind of her Achilles heel to this point. And, she's been great when she's healthy. It's just she needs to, consistently stay healthy. And I'm hoping that this year is that year, because I do think that, she, to your point, she could have a solid year if that's the case.
She stayed healthy and had a great year overseas in Italy. So I think that's where she was in Italy. I think she was in Venice, which amazing place to go spend a WNBA offseason, if you ask me.
Better than Minnesota.
Yeah, I think she was dealing with a little bit of an oblique injury that was pretty minor. And that was why she didn't play in the preseason. But that was more precautionary than anything else. She wasn't on the injury report. She was still practicing. There might have been one day she didn't practice. But again, I think of any non-Fee player, her starting spot was the safest. And last night you saw why.
I mean, you even look at her line from the season opener. She had 8 points, 8 boards, 7 assists, 2 steals in 32 minutes. That's Jess Shepard. Like that's who you're getting. She's just an all-around do-it-all kind of player. And that's why a lot of people really like Taylor Soule too. And because she just kind of does everything. I mean, they both thrive on not being that primary, whether it's scorer or rebounder or, whatever it may be. They don't focus on one area. They're doing everything. And that's where you need those players, and those players are the difference makers. And I mean, that's Jess Shepard. And that, I think that's a very, very important part. And like, you look at, your prediction of, her leading the team in assists. Nobody else had more than 2 on Friday's game. She had 7. And so, I mean,
and the best part about it was and Leo just pointed this out too in the chat here in our Zoom, is like she only had 1 turnover. And you go look, I think Fee had 5 turnovers. Rachel had 4 turnovers. Tiffany had 4 turnovers. I think Kayla had 3 turnovers. So, I mean, it's just as much the assist as it is taking care of the ball.
Yeah.
I think like you don't ever want to use a single game plus minus, as an end all be all. But I think that could really sum up just kind of what Jess meant. Even in that first game, she played a team high 32 minutes, and she was the only player with a positive plus minus. And I think that just goes to say is that, when she's out there, there's an impact to be made. And so, I'm a humble brag here is that she was a player that was going to be my most surprising player. But I think for some of us who've been obviously covering the team, we know that she's capable of doing this.
Yeah, it's just like she's not the first player that people are going to talk about. It's going to be Fee, it's going to be Diamond Miller, Kayla, because those are they're all great players, which is fun, or Dorka even. But she's just like a blue collar, get it out the mud, do all the dirty work and be a player that your teammates love playing with. And that's, it's a great thing that the Lynx have her. And, I think a lot of people around the league probably thought that extension was a great payday for Jess Shepard, maybe more than she deserved. But I think this season, if she plays like she did last night, that's going to ends up being a great deal for both sides. So I'm excited that her and Fee are 2, and Diamond too, are 2 players that they've got under contract now for a while, because those 3 are going to be a lot of fun to watch together.
Yeah. Well, we kind of mentioned a little bit. Let's maybe dive into the regular season opener on Friday night. Minnesota hosted Chicago, lost 77-66 at Target Center. Had a little bit of a rough second quarter. Well, they didn't have a little bit of a rough second quarter. They did have a rough second quarter, and they ended up falling behind, couldn't catch up. Jack, I know you were obviously at the game, and you kind of recapped it for Canis Hoopus, but if you want to maybe just start by just kind of diving into things and kind of giving us your thoughts on the game.
Yeah, I thought that my biggest takeaway was just how great Jess was. And too, like how easy everything came to Fee in the first 6 minutes of the game. I think she outscored the Sky 8-7 in the first half of the first quarter. So the first 5 minutes or so. Um, and her and Diamond just shot out of a cannon in transition, kind of like how we saw in that first preseason game. They were just really getting up and down after they got stops, which was really encouraging, which I think made the second quarter just as befuddling as it looked as we were watching it, because the first quarter looked really solid, and it was all the thing, and you saw all the things that you wanted to be able to see from this group, which was playing with pace, Fee getting to her spots offensively and scoring, and Diamond really making an impact defensively. I thought it was really cool that Cheryl started her on Kalia Copper, because hey, Cheryl talked about it after the game that she wanted to just throw her into the fire, because she thinks the quickest way that that Diamond and Dorka are going to get better is by being thrown into the fire. And there are two people that are eager to get burnt if that's what it takes to learn. And I thought I thought Diamond did a really good job holding her own with Ka in that first quarter. She had 8 points, I think, and 3 assists, but Diamond had some really nice kind of wall ups and blocked one of Ka's shots. I think Fee blocked 2 in the first quarter alone, which is saying something just for how electric she is off the dribble. But my takeaway wasn't a ton about the second quarter, to be honest, because I think that was just like a snowball effect of everybody kind of got the bug, and they just kind of needed to get it out of their system a little bit. And I thought it was just more encouraging that that didn't spiral into losing by 25, that they really came back and figured some things out in the fourth quarter, running things through Jess at the top of the key. And I thought their defensive activity was a whole lot better. I haven't gotten a chance to go back and rewatch it yet. I probably will later today or tomorrow, but Fee was really, really good off the ball defensively. You saw Dorka fly around. Cheryl praised her agility on defense afterwards, and BC had some good moments too. Made a couple threes, had some nice rotations defensively. But yeah, I just think that the point guard position could be a little bit of a work in progress. That's what we saw in the second quarter. But I wouldn't blame Rachel and Tiff quite as much as some other people would, just because I don't think anybody, tried to run to the ball to go get the ball and receive passes when they were hedging hard and trapping and blitzing out of the pick and roll. So, pick and roll is not going to be a huge part of this team's offense anyways. So I'm not overly concerned about it. I'd rather focus on, the fact that they came back from it and figured some things out to work against, a defensive coverage and that really aggressive trapping, blitzing coverage that they're going to see all year. So to be able to find some answers for that, I thought was encouraging, because sometimes that takes teams 3 and 4, times where you have a quarter like that to figure it out. So it was nice that they only needed one of those to be able to figure out a solution for it.
Yeah, I one of the biggest things that I was curious to see in we did see this in Friday's game was what if there was a sense of direction with the team, as far as like like you said, someone kind of taking things over, whether it be at the point guard position or just in general. And it seemed like they're still learning, like they're still trying to figure this out, and that kind of seemed a little evident, not only with youth, but just where people are fitting rotations. And that's not uncommon at the beginning of the year. I mean, it's the first game of the year. I mean, for a team that had a little bit of turnover, or a decent amount of turnover on as far as key contributors in the rotation, like that, that's going to happen. That, it'll be a learning progress. And, we even saw that like with New York, with the Liberty in their loss to the Washington Mystics. They got beat by, I think it was like 12 or 15. Like it takes time. And when you have new players, it'll take time. And that's what Minnesota's dealing with. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Yeah, you can tell that Tiffany Mitchell still, she mentioned it during training camp or during the preseason that when it came to the point guard position, her and Cheryl talked, when Tiffany Mitchell signed to Minnesota, that she was potentially going to slowly get that role throughout the year. And that could still be the case, but during the preseason, that's why she was so kind of caught off guard with being thrown, at the point guard right away, is because she didn't expect that. That's not a conversation that they had. But it'll be interesting to see if that indeed happens now at the start of the year. If, Cheryl's like, okay, this is your spot, take it and run. But they're still trying to figure it out in 2 weeks and 2.5 weeks or whatever it was for training camp is definitely not long enough to figure all that out. So they're still learning on the fly. But Leo, I know one thing Jack wrote about was, Fee being back. What did we kind of talked about this a little bit ago? What were your thoughts on Fee and kind of, what we saw and maybe how good it was to see her, like I said, 2021 Fee back?
Absolutely. It was great, obviously, to see her out there being the captain of the team, led the team in field goal attempts, was, by all means, the best defensive player out there on the Minnesota side of the court. On defense, I think we got to see, like, if anything, we got to see, like, all right, I'm going to have to play a lot. I'm about to play a lot this year. And not that she's not ready for it, but again, I know she says she's 100% healthy, but I mean, you can't really be 100% healthy until, you're really in the swing of things, in the middle of the season. I mean, you saw in the fourth quarter, it felt like, the Lynx were kind of doing that, they're getting close to single digits, but then just couldn't slice it down. And I think it was around like that, 2 to 3 minute mark ish. I think it was, I remember correctly, maybe it was 3 to 4 minute mark. Fee came out of the game and you could see she was breathing out of her mouth. It was a lot. She was running around trying to cover a lot of ground on both ends of the court. And so I think that'll get better with time. And I think, most nights she'll probably lead the team in minutes played. But I think, as she gets her legs under her a little bit more, I think that'll be great. I mean, I think defensively, that's definitely something I wanted to touch on was that, we saw a lot of great activity out there. And I'm not trying to take too much just from one game, but from what we did see, the activity and the effort was there. But I think, we're finally seeing what life is like post Sylvia Fowles. They were getting a lot of what they wanted at the rim. Look at Elizabeth Williams, who's, not a bad player by any means, but, she finished 7 of 9 from the field, 14 points, dominated I feel like both ends of the court when she was out there on defense. She was blocking everything out there, it felt like, or deterring everything. And then even on offense, there wasn't really much other than, Fee putting everything she could to try and defend, her. I think the Lynx are going to have to play bigger fives, later on, or even, tougher front courts. I could see that being the issue. You're proud of the perimeter offense. I mean, they held the Sky to 43% shooting, but 37 from, perimeter. And I think, Elena Smith shooting, 3 of 3. I mean, that's not something they expected. I think she's like a 20% career, like 3-point shooter. So there's little coverages like that, rotations I do think that they need to improve on. And just my general thoughts on the game as well, too, is that I think on offense, we did see, a lot of that. I liken it to when I play NBA 2K sometimes. Like when I'm trying to run plays, like set plays, I'm like, all right, the computer's telling me I need to pass it in straight to the post, off this screen or off this cut. And I just press the button to pass without looking like, oh, wait, there's a defender right in front of me that's just going to like deflect the ball immediately, where it's like, okay, I should probably run the second read, which is pass it to the other side. And yeah, I think that's what we need to see with the offense a little bit more, is a little bit more east to west movement with the ball instead of just north and south trying to like force the ball in there, where it's like, all right, well, there's someone on the weak side that's rotating over, like swinging to the other side, so I think again, there's clearly things I think Kayla McBride said in the post game about how we know what we did wrong, and that's the good thing, right? And so I definitely think they're fixable mistakes. And so overall, again, not too discouraged with it, but yeah, I mean, it was definitely a game.
Yeah, and I'm not concerned about it either, because they showed in the preseason that moving the ball hasn't been a problem for them. Like, they've been super unselfish, super willing to pass. I think whatever they decide to do, they just need to make quick decisions, right? I don't think you can do the D'Angelo Russell, just hold the ball for the first 10 seconds of the shot clock, waiting for something to get set up. And they just got to go quick, and that's going to be the biggest thing with this team. And you mentioned it, Leo, too. Like the backside rotations were pretty brutal in the second half. Like that was the only bad thing about the defense, I thought. Really like the corner rotations, in that they gave up a lot of corner threes, and it was just because they're either playing too far up the line, off the ball, or somebody got beat off the dribble, so they had to. The backside had to rotate over, and they just, didn't get their helpers on the backside. And that's just type of stuff that you have to iron out, right? it's a new team, playing different defensive concept this year, more aggressive. So like you said, I think those are things that I'm not overly concerned about. They can figure it out. And, if a team's going to shoot as well as Chicago did from the corners in the second half, like, more power to them, because the corner shot in the WNBA isn't what it is in the NBA. And that, the WNBA line is the exact same in the corner as it is in the slot, as it is atop the key. So it's really more just where players are comfortable. And there aren't a whole lot of players that are most comfortable shooting from the corners. So, so I think they'll live with that. And, at least in a game like that, to live with it. But that's something that they'll probably want to clean up, if they can here moving forward.
Yeah, on the plus side, Robin Parks and Kiana Taylor, who's no longer on the team, did not score a single 3-pointer yesterday, so that was good. No, just referencing there's a preseason game that their last preseason game on Saturday where those two killed the Lynx from perimeter. But yeah, and so either on the team or played yesterday.
When Jack, you talked about the overwhelming thing is figuring things out, and one thing that they are still trying to figure out is rotations. And that's kind of the next thing that you had touched on in your recap at Canis Hoopus, that we learned a little bit more about rotations, what they're thinking for rotations. What were your impressions on maybe what happened, what didn't happen, what players we did see play, and maybe the ones that we didn't really see play all that much?
I think the only two real takeaways that I had were that Dorka played twice as much as Milic did. And that was because Nina was out of position quite a lot on the offensive end. Like, she just wasn't coming up to set screens, and that's why you saw a lot of early turnovers in that second quarter. And when she did, she wasn't really releasing very quickly. She wasn't making herself available, in that pocket for Rachel. And she didn't do much of anything on the glass, and wasn't really a factor offensively. And the whole thing with Nina is, like, if she's not going to be able to score and pick and roll, and she's not going to be able to, to be that kind of all offense, 4 or 5 when she's out there, then she's not really giving you a whole lot, in addition to that. So it's just kind of a situation where it's like, all right, if it's not a Nina game, she just might not play all that much. But the nice thing is that when it is a Nina game, she's a really impactful player on the offensive end. So that was my first takeaway. And the other one really was just AP only playing 5 minutes. Cheryl, she was the first player that Cheryl called to off the bench, after Tiffany Mitchell. And she came in, I want to say she came in at the same time, as Nina did. But yeah, man, it looked rough out there. 0 for 3. She did have a really nice chase down block in transition. That was good to see, but just didn't look very sure of herself out there. If someone that making that much money is only playing 5 minutes, just brings up the natural question of how long is AP going to be here? She's in the last year of her contract. It's probably a contract that's easier to move now that it's in the final year. But also too, you wonder, is it a situation where if she wants a chance to be able to play, and she's not going to play a whole lot here, because it looked like Bridget Carlton got all the backup wing minutes in the second half. Like, she wants to play. I'm not sold that will happen here, if she's going to continue to play at this level.
I do think that, a lot of people, not to kind of get off of the I don't know, what you're talking about, or get off the topic, but a lot of people ask about Taylor Soule. They want, how are we going to get Taylor Soule back here? And that's the way that it will be, not necessarily, moving, AP. It could be, any other player, maybe moving them, or what the WNBA likes to call divorce, or trading them, or whatever it may be. That's what I think is ultimately going to take to get her back. That's really the only avenue to do that. And or you could,
if you wanted to swap out the replacement contract, like if you feel confident enough in Banham and Mitchell to run point guard, and you don't need someone like Lindsay Allen potentially. I think that was a name too that some fans may have wanted to see Soule on the roster instead of, especially consider, or maybe see them waive Allen and assign Soule to that contract, and then maybe if you need then to bring back Allen, maybe you'd have less competition on the open market or on the waiver side for Allen as opposed to Soul. But it's 3:00 here Central Time on Saturday, and Taylor Soul still has not been claimed yet. And Taylor Soul was at the game last night. And Demiris Dantas was as well. But again, like, it's pretty rare for a player that gets cut or waived to show back up at the game the next day. I think a lot of players, if it was a situation where they didn't feel confident they were going to come back, I think they would either get out of Dodge or just not show up. And I think for Demiris, like, I don't know that Demiris will be back. I doubt it, but I think it's also worth mentioning too that, Didi's been here for a long time. And I think that's a little bit of a different situation with Didi being there versus someone like Soul being there. So yeah, that's just something that I'm keeping my eye on for sure.
I do think that, when the intriguing part that you had talked about was the Lindsey Allen part to me. I could see, and now this is just me thinking as you were talking, I could see them, with the uncertainty at the point guard position, wanting to have Lindsey Allen there for the meantime to fill in that spot. And then let's say, okay, Tiffany Mitchell starts to get her feet wet and she starts to get comfortable in that role. Then maybe you swap out, Tiffany Allen for a Taylor Soul or kind of,
Lindsey
at that
Allen.
time.
You said Tiffany Allen.
Or Lindsey Allen. Yeah. Yeah. When Tiffany Mitchell gets comfortable in the point guard position, then waving Lindsey Allen and kind of adding Taylor Soul into that spot. I could see that happening. Now I don't know if that will or not. But that's a an intriguing option, I think. And when you're talking about them being at the game, it's different too when being with the team after you get waived and being at a game is a little different because when you're at a game, that people are going to notice who that player is. That they're going to be talking about, oh, why is Taylor Soul here? Why is Demiris Dantas here? Like, if you wanted them to just fly under the radar and not have people know that they're at the game, they're not going to come out and sit, by the team, or they're not going to be out there with the team.
And Taylor Soul was sitting in like the 4th row, pretty like right next to where like the team social employees sit, where like the PR people sit. But Demiris Dantas was like 15 rows up in the crowd. And that's why I didn't see Demiris right away. I saw a fan, I don't know who it was on Twitter, pointed it out to me, but yeah, like that, I didn't see Demiris until like the 4th quarter. But Soul was like there on her own, I think. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, Leo, were you surprised that she didn't make the team?
Yeah, if anyone watched any of the preseason games, I mean, or read a recap about the game, I mean, you would know that she's one of the most impactful players on the court. I mean, we even compared her to like a Rebecca Brunson type vibe, and when you're comparing that to a Hall of Famer, I mean, you would assume that player has a pretty great chance of making the team. And so, it's tough, but there's almost this weird kind of like everyone's like waiting for that second shoe to drop, like, all right, well, what's really going to happen now? And so, yeah, of course I was surprised, quite a bit disappointed as well too. But yeah, I mean, you look at some of these other players that, again, it's only been one game, some players have bad games, some players have good games, but you just look at some of the other, pieces that we have on the roster currently, and to think like, would you want that over, Taylor Soul and what she brings? It's hard to justify.
I agree.
Especially this year too. I mean, it'd be different if it was like maybe last year when they're trying to make a push, like we talked about for Sylvia Fowles, and kind of putting a strong team around her. Like at that point, you're taking all the proven players that you can get, where maybe now maybe Cheryl and Claire and the rest of the front office, maybe they want to take a Taylor Soul to just see what she could, do for an entire season. And if it doesn't work out, then you move on. But they're in a spot where they can like I've talked about, a few other times, they can just sit back and take inventory and kind of analyze everything. And that's a good spot to be at this point in the franchise, and just kind of evaluating things, where they want to go and who they're going to build around. And I think that's all important stuff. When it comes to looking forward, I mean, they, when this podcast drops, it'll be game day when the Lynx are hosting Atlanta. I think that's obviously a very winnable game for the Lynx. And then, Minnesota goes on the road for a pair of tough games. They have, a road game on May 25th, Thursday, May 25th against Phoenix. Of course, the lovely 9:00 Central Time games. And then Leo likes it. I think Leo likes those 9:00 games. It's what, 7:00 where you're at. But yeah, that'll be on Thursday, and then next Sunday they play at Las Vegas. And that'll be a tough game to play. Hit the road and go to Vegas to try and take down one of the title favorites, and then they stay on the road. I mean, they have this three game road trip that'll end with Dallas on May 30th. Like that's a tough road stretch at the beginning of the year for a young team. Dallas, I think, is a solid team, and they could maybe make a little push this year, but those are tough,
but I mean,
you
also think about, like, their first round draft pick is going to be out for most of the season. Diamond DeShields is going to be out for most of the season.
Yep.
And Tierra McCowan got hurt today. She hurt her knee today. So, I mean, those are three pretty important players that are all battling knee injuries, and it's not like they have a whole lot else besides, I mean, you've got Enrique, you've got Satu, and you've got Natasha Howard. So,
former Lynx.
Yeah, I mean, it could be tough sledding for them if those are all significant injuries.
It'll be interesting to see what they do against in Leo, if you want to pitch in or chime in on this, what they do against Phoenix and Las Vegas, because as we all know, Phoenix has Brittany Griner, Las Vegas has Candace Parker now. They have Asia Wilson. Like those are two bigger teams, and it'll be interesting to see what the Lynx do against that, because they don't have a Sylvia Fowles to match up with them anymore. They don't have that big center to kind of counter those other pieces. So Leo, what do you think we'll see from those two games, and just kind of what we might expect against a team that has a traditional big?
Yeah, I think there's obviously not going to be a single player or rotation that's going to counteract, either of those teams' front court, especially their starting front court. And so I think the Lynx are for sure going to have to shoot better than 6 for 24 from perimeter against those teams. They're going to have to punish them by, if you're going to be big, then, we're going to go small. I don't say go small, but they're going to have to be able to, have those perimeter or those, paint players have to, defend in space. I mean, that's the point of a 5-out offense, is like, all right, we're not going to let you just park down there and stand in the dunker spot next to Sylvia Fowles all the time. Like, y'all got to work. You're going to have to move. And so, I think that ball movement that they didn't really have, that they didn't do consistently in game one, and that perimeter shooting is going to have to come around. Like, Rachel Banham cannot be 0 for 4 from 3. Kayla McBride's going to have to do better than 2 for 8. There's going to be players that are going to have to, show up and have to shoot and punish from perimeter. They're not going to be able to score. Fee's not going to be able to bully them inside like, she did against the Sky. So, expectations, in mind, I'm hoping that the Lynx come in there. It's going to have to be it's cliche, but full team effort. The guards are going to have to help rebound. They're going to have to crash. We can't just have people leaking out, trying to get out. It's going to have to be secure, play possession by possession, and, shoot the ball well, move the ball. And that's what I'm hoping to see.
I think the overwhelming theme of this season, this team, is maybe don't expect a lot right away. It's going to take some time. Don't jump to conclusions right away. If they go, let's say they go 0-3 right away or something like that, or maybe they're 1-5 through 6 games, or 1-4 through 5 games. Like, things can turn around. Just kind of pump the brakes a little bit. Don't go too high or don't go too low. That might be, I think, the theme of this year, is if we're gonna kind of ride those waves of the lows and the highs, and you go through that with a young team. You go through that with a team in transition, and kind of, realigning itself, and that's the reality Minnesota faces themselves in. And if it does end up going wrong or going, south early and often and throughout the year, like we talked about earlier, still gonna have a pretty good draft class next year. So it's a good problem to have if that is the quote unquote disappointment you deal with at the end of the year. But we'll see. It'll be interesting, and I know I'm just happy basketball's back. I'm happy we have games back, and I'm excited for what we can do this year. I think not even talking about the Lynx, but with the Canis Hoopus team and everything that we can do coverage wise and everything that we have done, it's been good stuff. And for anybody that is looking to not only read the stuff that we talked about in this podcast, whether it be a roundtable or recaps or previews or feature stories, whatever it may be, everything under the sun, you can check out canishoopus.com. And you can find all of our work. Like I said, there's been a lot of good stuff. I'm lucky to work along these two guys and the rest of the Canis crew. And there'll definitely be more to come, and a lot of talented writers on the staff. And I'm just lucky to be a part of it. So Jack and Leo, I want to thank you again for joining. Had a great discussion. And if you guys could, one last time, if you want to just plug your socials and where people can find you.
Yeah, you can find me. Thank you. So find me on Twitter at YoLeo. So that's Y0LEO for some mediocre content.
Yeah, you can find me at JRBORMAN13. The Canis account is also one of my burner accounts. So I also rip some tweets off from there from time to time, but don't tell anyone. So.
Well, cool. Well, thank you guys again. I appreciate it, and we'll have to do this again soon. Maybe once the season kind of progresses a little bit more, we'll have a Canis Roundtable Part 2 on the podcast. How about that?
Let's do it.
All right.
Sounds great to me, man. Appreciate you having us.
Thank you guys, and we'll talk soon. Thank you to both Jack and Leo for joining this week. It was a great group discussion with the guys, getting them together to talk about all things Lynx basketball now that the season is in full swing and underway. As always, you can find all of our work on social media, as I mentioned in the podcast, or you can check us out at canishoopus.com. More to come this season. There's been plenty of good work there already, and definitely more to come as the summer progresses. I also want to give a shout out to Jeremy Rushing for producing this podcast as he does every week. If you do enjoy listening to this podcast and you'd like to show your support of Hitting the Hardwood, please visit patreon.com/Hitting the Hardwood to receive exclusive perks and much more as part of our Patreon community. The latest Patreon exclusive offering is a giveaway that I have going on through Homage, one of our partners who I will get to in a bit. But our Patreons, whoever join our Patreon page, they get included into a random drawing for a pair of shirts from Homage. A Lynx t-shirt, which I love, I enjoy. I have it right now, and it's one of my favorite shirts. It's a great shirt that you can get for free. And then you can also get any other shirt from Homage of your choosing. So it's a great promotion going on. So you can check us out on social media, Hitting Hardwood, or you can check me out at M_Hansen13. And once again, that's M_Hansen13, HANSEN. So make sure to check us out on social media and get yourself included into that drawing. A lot of great stuff so far this year, and plenty more to come. When it comes to our partners, I want to give a shout out to Homage and Better Edge, two of our partners this year that we have so far at Hitting the Hardwood. If you or you know of somebody that is interested in partnering with Hitting the Hardwood, please feel free to have them reach out to myself on social media, or you can email hittingthehardwood@gmail.com. Always willing to chat and look into different opportunities, and we're all about growing the game. So any chance we can partner with somebody to be able to do that is definitely a thing we want to do. Thankful for Homage and Better Edge right now that are supporters of the Hitting the Hardwood podcast. You can make sure you can get all of the the latest the great clothing, vintage clothing items, Lynx clothing items, WNBA items, anything you can really want, Homage has on their website. So make sure you go check them out at homage.com. That's HOMAGE.com. You can find 2 special links on our Hitting the Hardwood social media channel or platform. Through those links, if you purchase something on Homage's website, it comes back to support Hitting the Hardwoods. We appreciate any chance or if you are able to do that. When it comes to Better Edge, I just started. I have in the past, but with the start of the WNBA season, being able to put WNBA bets, in on Better Edge has been a great thing. I've been doing some competitions, just doing some picks on my own. So you can come join me and compete against me, join in competitions, battle against myself, other people in the community, other fans. You can do that by visiting betteredge.com. That's BETTOR edge.com. If you go visit betteredge.com/links and you use the promo code links, you get $20 in free play as you sign up. So make sure you go check them out. A lot of really great stuff. And if you like betting as much as I do, Better Edge is definitely the way to go. So thank you to both of them for their partnership and their support of the podcast. And also thank you for your support of the podcast. Anytime that you listen to this podcast, I definitely am appreciative for everything that you guys do and for all the support that you show me throughout the year. I truly enjoy what I do, and you guys are a big part of that, not only on social media, through this podcast, through every other avenue, whether it's myself or Hitting the Hardwood. So I appreciate everything. I'm lucky to be able to do this on a daily basis. This is my 8th year covering the WNBA, and it never gets old. And you guys are a big part of that, and I really do appreciate it. So more to come this year. The season's just underway, but it'll be a good year, and there'll be plenty more to come with this podcast through Hitting the Hardwood. All of my written content. You can find me on social media, like I said, to find all of that latest information. So welcome back to the WNBA season. More to come. I'm really excited with some guests we have coming up here in the next couple weeks. And thank you for listening this week, and I will see you all next week.
3, 2, 1.